The rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Seattle penthouse had been the only sound for a week. A rhythmic countdown to a funeral that hadn't happened yet. Then came the click of the front door. Not a frantic entrance, but a slow, entitled turn of the key that shattered the silence of a grieving husband. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like she had just won a game he didn't know they were playing, offering a smirk instead of an apology. If the weight of unsaid words and the cold precision of a marriage unraveling keeps you awake at night, stay with me. There are secrets here that are too heavy to carry alone, and the truth is just beginning to bleed through the cracks. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker, harder to hold on to. Lucas sat in the wingback chair facing the panoramic window of their 42nd floor apartment, a glass of untouched scotch resting on the side table. The condensation had long since pooled at the base, ruining the finish of the wood, but he couldn't bring himself to care. 7 days. 168 hours since Nora had walked out for a quick coffee run and vanished into the gray mist of the city. The police had left hours ago, their notebooks full of useless details about her coat, camel trench, her shoes, Louboutin, red soles, and her state of mind, seemingly fine. They were treating it as a voluntary disappearance now, a polite way of telling a husband that his wife likely didn't want to be found. The apartment was suffocatingly quiet. It was a museum of her taste. The abstract sculptures, the cream-colored sofas that dared you to sit on them, the scent of her expensive sandalwood diffuser that still lingered, ghost-like. Then the lock turned. The sound was thunderous in the silence. It wasn't the frantic scratching of a key by someone escaping danger, nor the hesitant turn of someone ashamed. It was smooth, practiced, entitled. Lucas didn't stand up. His muscles tensed, locking him into the chair as the heavy oak door swung open. Nora stepped inside. She wasn't disheveled. She wasn't crying. She was wearing a new coat, black cashmere cinched tight at the waist, and her hair was blown out to perfection, bouncing slightly as she shook off the umbrella. She placed her keys in the crystal bowl on the console table, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. She looked at him across the expanse of the living room. Lucas remained in the shadows, the city lights casting hollows over his unshaven face. He looked like a man who had aged a decade in a week. She looked like she had just come from a spa. "You're in the dark," she said. Her voice was steady, devoid of the tremor one might expect from a woman who had been the subject of a citywide manhunt. 7 days, Nora," Lucas croaked. His voice was brittle, unused. 7 days. She sighed, a long, exasperated sound, as if he were the one being unreasonable. She walked toward the kitchen island, pouring herself a glass of water from the pitcher, ignoring the scotch, ignoring him. "I needed space, Lucas. God, the police called my mother. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" Lucas felt a cold numbness spread from his chest to his fingertips. The relief he thought he would feel. The overwhelming, sobbing gratitude that she was alive was absent. In its place was something sharp and jagged. Embarrassing? He stood up slowly. "I thought you were dead. I identified a Jane Doe at the morgue on Tuesday because she had your hair color." Nora turned, leaning her hip against the marble counter. She took a sip of water, her eyes scanning him with a mix of pity and annoyance. Then the corner of her lip curled up. A smirk. A small, devastating expression of superior knowledge. "Oh, stop the drama, Lucas," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "I just needed to breathe without your constant suffocating care." I'm here now, aren't I? She set the glass down and crossed her arms, that smirk deepening. Honestly, look at you. You're a mess. Be grateful I even returned. Most women in my position wouldn't have bothered coming back to this. The words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Be grateful. The Lucas of a week ago would have apologized. He would have begged for forgiveness for worrying too much, would have promised to give her space, would have thanked her for gracing him with her presence again. But the Lucas of a week ago hadn't received the bank alerts. The Lucas of a week ago hadn't seen the timestamp on the toll bridge camera. He walked into the light of the kitchen. He didn't reach for her. He didn't shout. He looked at her with a clarity that made her shift uncomfortably for the first time. You didn't return because you wanted to, Nora, Lucas said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. You returned because Julian's wife came home early. The smirk vanished. Her face went slack, the color draining from her cheeks faster than the rain sliding down the glass. And just so we're clear, Lucas continued, stepping closer until he could smell the faint trace of a cologne that wasn't his on her coat. I'm not grateful. I'm disappointed. I had the locks scheduled to be changed in the morning. He walked past her toward the guest room, leaving her standing in the expensive, silent kitchen, the echo of her own arrogance crashing down around her. The door to the guest bedroom clicked shut, engaging the heavy brass lock with a finality that echoed through the hallway. Lucas didn't turn on the lights. He didn't need to. The ambient glow of the Seattle skyline, filtered through the rain-streaked windows, provided enough illumination for what he needed to do. He walked to the closet, reached to the top shelf behind a stack of winter blankets, and pulled down a slim, nondescript manila folder. It felt heavy in his hands, not with paper, but with the weight of the reality it contained. Outside the door, the silence stretched thin. Then, the inevitable sound of Nora's footsteps, sharp, agitated clicks on the hardwood, approached. "Lucas, open this door," she demanded. Her voice had lost its earlier smirk. It was now tight, laced with the indignity of being dismissed. "You're being ridiculous. Julian is a client. We were discussing a rebrand for his winery. My phone died. The charger broke." "God, you're so paranoid." Lucas didn't answer. He sat on the edge of the guest bed and opened the folder. His mind flashed back to 72 hours ago, Tuesday, the height of his panic. He was sitting in a booth at a diner 3 blocks from his office, the kind of place where the coffee tasted like burnt rubber and nobody asked questions. Across from him sat Marcus, a forensic accountant Lucas had used for corporate audits in the past. Marcus looked uncomfortable, sliding a tablet across the laminated table. "I found the leak, Lucas," Marcus had said, his voice low. "It's not identity theft. It's not a hacker." Lucas remembered staring at the spreadsheet on the screen, the numbers blurring into a nauseating red haze. "She's been siphoning it for 8 months, Marcus explained, tapping a column labeled Consulting Fees, JR Holdings. Small amounts at first. 2,000 here, 5,000 there. Just enough to look like legitimate business expenses for her PR firm. But last week, 2 days before she disappeared, there was a lump sum transfer, $50,000. To who? Lucas had asked, his hands trembling around the ceramic mug. JR Holdings is registered to a Julian Reed, Marcus said, looking down at his coffee. He owns a vineyard in Chelan, and Lucas, the transfer note didn't say consulting. It said lease deposit. Back in the guest room, Lucas traced the line on the printed bank statement with his thumb. Lease deposit. She hadn't just gone for a fling. She had been buying a new life. She had been funding her escape with the money he had earned from 16-hour days designing sustainable parks and corporate campuses. The betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was a line item in a budget she had been managing for nearly a year. "Lucas!" Nora's fist thumped against the door, louder this time. "This is childish. I come home exhausted, traumatized by the stress of everything. And you lock me out? I need my things. My moisturizer is in there." The banality of the request, moisturizer, almost made him laugh. It was a terrifying sound in the dark room, a dry, humorless exhale. She didn't know he knew about the money. She thought he was just a jealous husband guessing about a man. She thought she could spin this, smooth it over with a few days of cold shoulders followed by passionate makeup sex and a well-timed gift. She had no idea that the foundation she was standing on had already been condemned. Lucas stood up and walked to the door. He placed his hand flat against the cool wood. He could hear her breathing on the other side, ragged, angry breaths. "Go to sleep, Nora," he said, his voice low but carrying clearly through the barrier. "I'm not sleeping on the couch in my own house," she hissed. "Then sleep at Julian's," Lucas replied, "though I doubt he has room now that his wife is back." There was a gasp, followed by a profound, stunned silence. He knew exactly what she was doing. She was scrambling, checking her phone, wondering who had talked, wondering how much he knew. He could practically hear the gears of her manipulation grinding to a halt. Lucas walked back to the bed and slid the folder under the mattress. He lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. The fear that had gripped him for 7 days, the fear of her death, of her pain, was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, metallic clarity. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain, and for the first time in a week, he didn't pray for her return. He planned for her removal. The war had started, and she didn't even know she was already losing. The zipper of Nora's dress hissed as it slid up her spine, a sound that felt violently loud in the silence of the master bedroom. It was a fluid, emerald-green silk gown that clung to her frame, designed to catch every eye in the room. In any other year, Lucas would have rested his hands on her waist after fastening it, pressing a kiss to the curve of her neck. Tonight, he pulled his hands away as if the silk were burning him. "Thank you," Nora murmured, turning to face him. She reached out to straighten his bow tie, her fingers lingering on the knot. Her eyes were wide, imploring, practicing the look of innocent devotion she would wear for the cameras. "We need to look united tonight, Lucas. For the firm. You know the board is watching." Lucas looked down at her. The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after he had locked her out of the bedroom, she was coaching him on optics. "Don't touch me," he said, his voice flat. Nora's hands froze, then slowly retreated. "I'm trying to help you, Lucas. If we look estranged, the rumors start. Do you want them talking about your wife's disappearance or your award?" "They're already talking, Nora," he replied, turning to grab his jacket. "The only difference is that tonight, I have to stand next to the punchline." The drive to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel was a study in claustrophobia. The rain had stopped, leaving the Seattle streets slick and reflecting the neon blur of the city. Inside the limousine, the air was thick with unspoken venom. Nora checked her makeup in a compact mirror, humming softly, a nervous tick she thought he didn't notice. When the doors opened, the assault of camera flashes was instantaneous. It was the annual gala for the Pacific Northwest Architecture Guild, and Lucas was the guest of honor. He stepped out, buttoning his jacket, and offered his hand to Nora. It was a mechanical gesture, a muscle memory of a marriage that no longer existed. She took it, squeezing tight, her nails digging into his palm as she flashed a dazzling smile to the press line. Inside the ballroom, the noise was deafening, clinking crystal, orchestral swells, and the drone of polite conversation. Lucas moved through the crowd like a shark, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, his smile reaching nowhere near his eyes. Nora stayed glued to his side, playing the part of the doting wife perfectly. She laughed at the right moments, touched his arm affectionately when a partner made a joke, and whispered meaningless observations in his ear. It was a masterful performance. It made Lucas sick. "You're doing well," she whispered as they grabbed champagne from a passing waiter. "See? We're a team. We can get past this." She actually believed it. She believed that a public appearance could suture a severed limb. "Lucas, incredible work on the waterfront project," a voice boomed. It was George, the firm's senior partner, but Lucas's attention had drifted. Over George's shoulder, across the sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns, Lucas saw him, Julian Reed. He was standing near the bar, swirling a glass of red wine, likely his own vintage. He looked tired, his usual arrogant posture slumped slightly. But he wasn't looking at the wine. He was looking at Nora. Lucas felt the muscles in Nora's arm tense beneath his grip. It was involuntary, a biological reaction to the presence of the man she had destroyed her life for. He watched, fascinated and horrified, as Nora's eyes locked with Julian's. It lasted less than a second, a micro moment in a crowded room. But in that glance, Lucas saw everything. It wasn't just longing, it was panic. It was a desperate question asked across 30 feet of mahogany floor. "Did you tell him?" Julian looked away first, breaking the connection and turning his back to the room. Nora let out a breath she had been holding, her hand trembling slightly against her champagne flute. Lucas turned to her, his expression pleasant, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. "Go say hello," he said. Nora stiffened, her smile freezing in place. "What? He's a client, isn't he? You said so yourself last night," Lucas said, taking a sip of his drink, his eyes cold and hard. "Go say hello to Julian, unless of course there's a reason you can't." Nora paled, her grip on his arm loosening. She looked at Lucas, searching for a trace of the husband who used to protect her, but found only a stranger who was enjoying the show. "I think I need some air," she stammered, pulling away and heading toward the terrace doors, avoiding Julian's direction entirely. Lucas watched her go, then turned back to George, raising his glass. "My apologies, George. Nora is feeling a bit, overwhelmed by the attention. Please continue." The applause from the ballroom was a muffled roar, like the sound of the ocean heard from underwater. Lucas let the heavy mahogany doors swing shut behind him, cutting off the noise and the suffocating heat of the gala. The corridor of the Fairmont was cool, lined with gilded mirrors that reflected a man who looked composed, even if he felt like he was bleeding internally. He didn't go to the terrace to find his wife. He turned left, toward the dimly lit hotel bar, the one place he knew a coward would retreat to. Julian Reed was there, just as Lucas had predicted. He was sitting at the far end of the polished zinc bar, nursing a tumbler of bourbon. He looked smaller than he had in the photos Lucas had found online, less the dashing vineyard owner, more a man eroding under the weight of his own choices. Lucas walked over and signaled the bartender. "Club soda with lime," And another round for him. He pointed to Julian's glass. Julian flinched. He looked up, his eyes widening as they landed on Lucas. For a moment, he looked like he might run, his hand twitching toward his coat on the stool next to him. "Don't," Lucas said softly, sliding onto the stool beside him. "If you leave, I'll make a scene. And I think we both know your wife, Sarah, is it, wouldn't appreciate that kind of publicity." Julian swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He didn't reach for the coat. "Lucas, look, I didn't know she was coming tonight, I swear." "I don't care about tonight, Julian," Lucas said, taking the soda the bartender placed on a coaster. He took a sip, the lime sharp on his tongue. "I care about last week. I care about the $50,000 my wife transferred to your holding company." Julian's face went ashen. He stared into his drink, his grip on the glass tightening until his knuckles turned white. "I returned it," he whispered. "Check the accounts. I wired it back this morning." "I know," Lucas lied. He didn't know, but he sensed it. "What I want to know is why. Why send it back? Why send her back?" Julian turned to look at him then, and in his eyes, Lucas saw a pathetic mixture of pity and fear. "She didn't tell you?" "She told me she needed space," Lucas said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She told me I was suffocating her." Julian let out a short, bitter laugh. He downed the rest of his bourbon in one burning gulp. "She didn't need space, Lucas. She needed a co-signer. She wanted me to leave Sarah. She had it all planned out, the cabin, the lease in Chelan, the new PR firm she wanted to start with my winery as the anchor client." Lucas felt a physical blow to his chest, precise and agonizing. It wasn't just an affair, it was a replacement. She had built a complete architectural model of a life without him, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. "So what happened?" Lucas asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I told her no," Julian said, signaling for the check, eager to escape. "I have kids, Lucas. I have a reputation. A week in the woods is one thing. Blowing up my life is another. When I told her I wasn't leaving Sarah, she went crazy. She threw a vase through the cabin window." Julian stood up, throwing a $100 bill onto the counter. He looked down at Lucas, who was still sitting perfectly still. "She didn't come back to you because she loves you, man," Julian said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "She came back because I kicked her out. She had nowhere else to go." Julian turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the plush carpet. Lucas sat alone in the dim light. The truth settled over him like a shroud. He wasn't the husband she couldn't live without. He was the safety net. He was the warm apartment, the steady income, the reputation she could wear like a coat until the next storm passed. He looked at his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. He expected to see a broken man. Instead, he saw someone cold, someone dangerous. The last crack in his armor hadn't weakened him. It had let the light in, revealing the rot underneath. Lucas finished his soda, stood up, and adjusted his tuxedo jacket. It was time to go home. Monday morning in Seattle arrived with a deceptive brightness. The sun glinting off the glass towers of downtown, as if the city itself were resetting for the week. In his corner office at Vance & Partners, Lucas sat behind a sprawling oak desk, but he wasn't looking at blueprints for the new arboretum. On his computer screen, a different kind of architecture was being dismantled. He had 3 windows open: his primary brokerage account, the joint checking account, and the credit card portal. With a few precise clicks, he wasn't just moving money, he was rewriting the terms of his existence. He initiated a transfer of the liquid savings, money they had earmarked for a vacation home in Tuscany, into a trust account solely in his name. Next, he flagged the joint credit cards as compromised, a technical truth given that they had been used to fund a betrayal. Finally, he lowered the spending limit on Nora's supplementary Amex to $500, enough for groceries, not enough for escape. He didn't feel malicious. He felt efficient. It was the same detached focus he used when pruning dead branches from a design to save the tree. Across town, in the polished marble foyer of Lumiere, a high-end boutique in Pacific Place, Nora was attempting to soothe her bruised ego. She had selected a silk scarf and a pair of Italian leather boots, items she didn't need, but purchasing them felt like a way to reclaim the normalcy that was slipping through her fingers. She placed the platinum card on the glass counter with a practiced casualness. The sales associate, a young woman who knew Nora by name, smiled and swiped the card. A beat of silence. Then, a frown. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance," the girl said, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "It says declined. Contact issuer." Nora felt a flush of heat crawl up her neck. "That's impossible. Try it again. The chip is probably worn." The girl nodded and swiped again. The machine beeped its harsh, digital refusal. I don't understand," Nora stammered, conscious of the other customers browsing nearby. She dug into her purse, her fingers fumbling as she pulled out the backup visa. "Use this one." Second swipe, second beep, declined. The silence in the boutique was sudden and absolute. To Nora, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The sales associate looked at her with pity, a look far worse than judgment. "I can hold these for you?" the girl offered gently. "No," Nora snapped, snatching the cards back. "There's clearly a bank error. I'll sort it out." She walked out of the store, her heels clicking rapidly on the tile, her heart hammering against her ribs. She reached the privacy of the escalator and dialed Lucas's number. In his office, Lucas watched his phone light up. Nora calling. He let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. He imagined her panic. For 10 years, the money had just been there, a magical resource that replenished itself. She had never asked where it came from, or how hard he worked to keep the reservoir full. She only knew how to open the tap. Now, for the first time, she was turning the handle and finding nothing but dust. He picked up on the last ring. "This is Lucas." "Lucas." Her voice was shrill, bordering on hysteria. "Something is wrong with the accounts. My cards are being declined. I'm at Pacific Place and—" "I know," Lucas interrupted, his voice calm, level, and utterly unconcerned. "I flagged some suspicious activity on the accounts this morning. The bank froze them for security." "Suspicious activity?" she demanded. "What activity?" "Large unauthorized transfers," Lucas lied smoothly, swiveling his chair to look out at the sound. "Rent deposits, travel expenses, things that didn't look like us. So, they locked everything down pending an investigation." There was a silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, terrified silence. She knew exactly what activity he was referring to. To argue against it would be to confess. "How long?" she asked, her voice small. "Hard to say," Lucas replied, reaching for a pen to sign a contract on his desk. "Fraud investigations take time, Nora. You might want to come home. There's nothing you can buy right now anyway." He hung up before she could respond. He placed the phone face down on the desk. He hadn't raised his voice, but he had just put a leash around her neck. And with every declined transaction, he was pulling it tighter. The penthouse was dark when Lucas returned. save for the amber glow of the streetlights filtering through the rain-streaked glass. He found Nora in the master bedroom, a space that had become a battlefield of silence. She was sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair with rhythmic, almost aggressive strokes. She had changed out of her street clothes into a silk robe, the pale blush one he had bought her for their 5th anniversary. It was a calculated choice. Lucas loosened his tie, tossing it onto the armchair. He didn't speak. He moved with the weary economy of a man who just wanted the day to end. "You're late," Nora said, her voice soft, attempting a warmth that didn't reach her eyes. She watched him through the mirror, assessing his mood like a bomb disposal technician. "Work," Lucas replied, unbuttoning his shirt. "I'm sleeping in the guest room again." "Lucas, stop." She set the brush down with a sharp clack. She stood up and turned to face him, tightening the sash of her robe. "This punishment. It's gone on long enough. You froze the accounts. You made your point. Can we please just be adults?" She walked toward him, the silk rustling softly. The scent of her perfume, jasmine and tuberose, filled the small distance between them. It was a scent that used to make his pulse race, a signal that she was available, that she wanted him. Now, it smelled like desperation. "I'm not punishing you, Nora," Lucas said, turning toward the closet to grab a fresh shirt. "I'm protecting myself. There's a difference." "Is there?" She stepped into his path, blocking him. She reached out, her fingers trailing lightly down his bare chest. It was a move she had used 1,000 times, a tactile command that usually ended with him pulling her close. "You miss me. I know you do. You're angry, and you have every right to be. But don't pretend you don't want this." Lucas looked down at her hand. Her nails were manicured, perfect, resting on his skin. He felt nothing. No spark. No anger. Just a profound, hollow exhaustion. He reached up and took her wrist, removing her hand from his chest with the same dispassionate grip one might use to remove a stray thread from a jacket. He didn't squeeze. He didn't shove. He just moved it away. "It doesn't work anymore, Nora," he said quietly. Nora's face crumbled, the mask of seduction slipping to reveal the shock underneath. She snatched her hand back as if he had burned her. "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped, her voice rising. "I am your wife. I am the best thing that ever happened to you. You spent 10 years begging for my attention, and now you're going to act like you're above it?" "I'm not above it," Lucas said, looking her in the eye. "I'm just outside of it. You walked out that door 7 days ago, and you took the version of me that loved you with you. He didn't come back when you did." The rejection hit her harder than the declined credit cards. Money was a resource. Desire was power. If he didn't want her, she couldn't control him. The realization twisted her features into something ugly. "You're pathetic," she spat, stepping back, wrapping her arms around herself. "You think you're so noble? You're just a boring, safe landscape architect who got lucky enough to marry out of his league." "Julian saw fire in me. You just see a possession you think you lost." "I didn't lose you, Nora," Lucas said, walking past her to the door. "I threw you away. There's a difference." He stopped at the threshold, looking back at her standing alone in the center of the room, the silk robe no longer armor but a costume for a play that had been canceled. "And by the way," he added, his voice devoid of malice, "Julian didn't see fire. He saw a lease deposit. Good night." He closed the door gently, leaving her in the darkness of the room she used to rule. The silence of the penthouse was shattered not by a scream, but by a vibration. It started at 6 a.m. on Nora's nightstand, a relentless, buzzing drill against the marble surface. Then came the chime of email notifications, a cascading digital avalanche that dragged Nora from a restless sleep into a waking nightmare. She grabbed her phone, squinting against the harsh blue light. Her screen was flooded. Twitter mentions, Google alerts, frantic texts from her junior partners. She opened the first link, a gossip column from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer that usually covered charity galas, but today had chosen violence. The headline was simple, brutal, and humiliating. Found or fleeting. While husband searched morgues, socialite Nora Vance spotted at Chelan Winery. Nora felt the blood drain from her face. There was a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. It was her, sitting on the deck of Julian's cabin, sunglasses on, holding a glass of wine. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. She threw the covers off and sprinted into the living room. Lucas was already there, dressed for work in a charcoal suit, drinking black coffee by the window. He was reading the same article on his tablet. He looked up as she burst in, her hair disheveled, her face a mask of terror. "You saw it," she gasped, clutching her phone like a weapon. "Lucas, you have to do something. This is a disaster. If my clients see this, if the board sees this..." "It's trending," Lucas said calmly, swiping a finger across the screen. "Apparently, people don't like finding out they wasted their prayers on a spa weekend." "It wasn't a spa weekend," Nora shrieked, pacing the room. "We need to issue a statement, immediately, a joint statement. We'll say I had a mental health crisis. We'll say I was in a treatment facility in Chelan, not a winery. You need to corroborate it. Call the editor. Tell them you knew where I was the whole time." She stopped in front of him, breathless, her eyes wide and pleading. She was asking him to lie for her, to use his reputation as a shield to deflect the shrapnel of her own grenade. Lucas set the tablet down on the coffee table. The glass made a sharp clack. "No," he said. Nora blinked. "What?" "I said no," Lucas repeated, standing up. He towered over her, not with menace, but with an indifference that was far colder. "I spent 7 days lying to the police, lying to your parents, lying to myself. I'm done lying, Nora." "You want to destroy me?" she hissed, stepping back. Her pleading turning to venom. "You think this won't hurt you too? You're the cuckold in this story, Lucas. Everyone is laughing at you." "Let them laugh," Lucas replied. "I'd rather be the fool who loved too much than the liar who ran away." He reached into his briefcase, which was sitting on the armchair. He pulled out a thick, heavy envelope. It wasn't the cream stationery of a press release. It was legal manila, sealed with a red string. "You wanted a statement," Lucas said, extending the envelope toward her. "Here it is." Nora stared at the package. Her hands trembled as she took it. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. The weight of it was distinct. "Divorce?" she whispered, the word choking her. "Over a mistake? Lucas, we can fix the optics. We can fix the narrative." "It's not about optics, Nora. It's about the exit strategy you already paid for," Lucas said, checking his watch. "I filed an hour ago. The locks on the apartment will be changed at noon. I suggest you pack a bag before the press camp's out in the lobby. I hear the lighting in Chelan is beautiful this time of year." He walked past her, picking up his keys. He didn't look back at his wife, who stood frozen in the center of the room, clutching the papers that marked the end of her reign. He opened the front door and walked out into the hall. the sound of the elevator arriving like the bell of a final round. The deadline Lucas had set was noon, but the rain had returned, turning the Seattle streets into a blurred watercolor of gray and steel. By 11:45 a.m., the lobby of the high-rise was quiet, save for the rhythmic swish of the revolving doors. Nora stood by the concierge desk, flanked by 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases. They were the only things she could carry, the only tangible remnants of a life that had taken a decade to build and 7 days to dismantle. She wore oversized sunglasses, hiding eyes that were likely red-rimmed, though whether from tears or lack of sleep, no one would ever know. Henry, the doorman who had greeted her every day for 6 years with a smile, stood stiffly behind the marble counter. He didn't offer to call her a town car. He didn't ask about her day. He simply held out a gloved hand. "The key fob, Mrs. Vance, please." Nora hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the small black plastic disc. It was more than a key. It was access. It was the elevator ride to the 42nd floor, the security of the penthouse, the identity of being Nora Vance. Giving it up felt like an amputation. She looked at the glass doors. Outside, a few photographers were huddled under umbrellas, tipped off by the morning's headlines, waiting for the disgraced socialite to make her exit. There would be no private car today. Just a yellow taxi idling at the curb. With a shuddering breath, she dropped the fob into Henry's palm. It made a hollow plastic sound against the leather glove. "Goodbye, Henry," she whispered. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he replied, his voice professional and utterly detached. She pushed through the doors and into the flashbulbs, vanishing into the gray mist of the city she used to think she owned. Lucas returned to the apartment at 6:09 p.m. The silence that greeted him was different this time. A week ago, the silence had been heavy, suffocating, filled with the ghosts of his own terrifying imagination. It had been the silence of a waiting room. Now, as he walked across the hardwood floors, the silence was clean. It was the stillness of a church after the service has ended. He walked to the kitchen. The crystal bowl on the console table was empty. Her keys were gone. He walked to the master bedroom. The closet door was open. Her side was bare, the velvet hangers stripped of their silk and cashmere. The floor, usually cluttered with her shoes, was swept clean. The scent of her sandalwood diffuser was fading, overtaken by the crisp, recycled air of the HVAC system. He didn't feel the crushing weight of loneliness he had expected. He didn't feel the urge to drink. He walked to the window, the same spot where he had sat 7 days ago, waiting for a wife who was never coming back. The view was the same. The Space Needle piercing the clouds, the ferries cutting white wakes across the dark water of Puget Sound. But the man looking at it had changed. The panic that had defined him, the desperate need to be enough for someone who only wanted more, had evaporated. He remembered her smirk when she had walked through the door. "Be grateful I even returned." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He deleted the tracking apps. He deleted the contacts for the forensic accountant. He deleted the thread of texts where he had begged her to come home. Lucas went to the small bar cart and poured a glass of water. He took a sip, the cold liquid grounding him. He looked around the empty, beautiful apartment. It was just a space now. Walls, glass, and furniture. It wasn't a shrine to a marriage, and it wasn't a prison of memories. For the first time in 7 days, the void didn't scare him. It looked like room to breathe. Lucas turned off the lamp, plunging the room into a peaceful twilight. and for the first time in a week, he knew he would sleep.